I was thinking it would be really nice to just go around and do names and maybe a card, like a card that you like, just as a way to introduce ourselves to one another, and I can start. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited that there are people who are interested in tarot, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a really long time in a bunch of different ways, and the ways that I've been thinking about tarot lately are very correlating with the congruent study of dream work that I've been doing. And there's a quote that a tarot reading is a dream standing still. So if you think about a dream that you have or a tarot reading that you have in front of you, these ways to just look at it from like a perspective that's slightly outside of like this like reality that we understand, and to then be really thoughtful and holistic as we look at what that environment is inviting in for us. And you know, my journey with tarot has been, I find that the way that it is in Western culture, like it can be really reductionist. So like, you know, you get a card and then you open the page to a book that tells you what the card means, and I'm trying to deconstruct all of that. So what I'm hoping we can do here, like the intentions that I have is in the conversation that we're going to be having, is to try to like bring a sense of not knowing, and like staying in the not knowing, and like staying with the image that the card invites, because like the way that I read intuitively is very, it's like jazz. Like if you think of the deck as an instrument that you play, that like you have this like bass line that you can understand, and then play off of that, seeing what keys you have to press on in the reading in front of you. And my name is Emily. And I go by Emily and M. And the card that has been coming up a lot for me in my readings lately is Temperance, the Alchemist. And I really like Temperance because, you know, the way that they're like taking the cups in between their hands to try to find this balance is this like constant seeking that I'm feeling like I'm centering around right now. Should we go this way or this way? Names, pronouns, cards.
Shannon, and yeah, yesterday I drew the moon card, and I guess I felt some trepidation about drawing that card, but then I was kind of looking at it, and I kind of realized kind of over the day that it's kind of where I am in a lot of times. I'm sort of like the moon inside the sun that's also like has causing all these sort of tidal things going on. So, and there's like a lot of like energy kind of. So it kind of made a lot of sense because I was definitely going to go through that yesterday, and I think I go through that a lot. So.
I'm Beverly, and I did a reading, actually in my phone app, where I asked how could I solve my problem of money, what might I contemplate to solve my problem of money, and I got the High Priestess, which is maybe a little weird, but I mean, whatever that means, but I don't know why, it was just something that popped in my head to do. But there's a quote that has influenced me maybe more than any other quote, and I don't even know who said it anymore. I saw it in a kind of a semi-hokey looking New Age book years ago, but it's come back to me and meant more to me than a lot of other, like anything else I can think of, that said the role of the High Priestess in a new society is to be the champion of life as it is, as it actually is, with all of its pain and all of its glory and all of its monotony and all of its delight, what actually is. And sometimes that comes back to me, you know, and when it does, it's always very meaningful.
I'm Amber, and I've been thinking about the sun lately. Pulled the sun in the past 2 readings that I've had, and very key points, thinking about the relationship between my own inner child and childlike oneness with the world, and then also my desire to work with children, have children, and how sometimes those things are complementary and sometimes at odds with feeling at peace and in flow. So the sun has felt like an important theme.
My name is Wednesday, and I haven't done a reading for myself in a while, but a few months ago I was having a meditation on a tower because I thought it was important to be questioning things. And after I meditated on the tower for a while, it happened, the tower fell. And it was not easy, but it's getting better.
I'm Jenny. So I have a strong connection to the Hanged Man because at a time in my life when I really was completely without a compass at all, that card kept showing up, and so I felt as though through accepting the meanings of that card, I was able to grow a lot. And so I'm not really sure if the Hanged Man really represents where I'm at right now anymore, but I feel kind of, I cherish that card because it taught me a lot.
I'm Abby, and the card I've been studying the most lately has been the Magician. It's been coming up for me a lot, and something that has been new to me is the idea of the magician, the ease with which the magician is able to function in the world in the way that he can treat work as play and kind of have a silenced will and be very present in the moment. And that's something that I've been working on a lot.
My name is Matthew, and I guess I haven't done a reading in a couple of days, so it's just sort of like a general idea, but it's a lot of the readings are kind of looking at all of the challenges and how just making slight shifts on the way that we look at them based on the different characteristics of the one card. It's like, oh, it's not the way that it seems right at first.
My name is Diana. I like the Chariot card. I like being in cars and going fast. That's it.
I am Sylvia. I also like to go fast, but I might be a little slow because of the accent. But I have no concept about tarot, but I have always been fascinated by the images of it, and I feel very attracted to it. I want to believe myself as an artist all my life, but I'm struggling through it. And today I had a wonderful reading to thank you to all of you. And my card was the Fool, right? And then the Magician.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt very well about it.
I'm Miranda, and the card I've been really into recently is Strength. I guess for like a lot of, you just need strength in everyday life, but over the past couple of years I've had some pretty extreme challenges, I guess, and I've been healing from those and learning that strength is a combination of commitment and compassion. That's what I've read in a book about strength, which is symbolized in the infinity. So if you have both of those things, you can be like infinitely strong, and I just really love that symbolism behind that.
I'm Rebecca. I've really been liking the Empress card and the Hermit card recently, and how they like can relate to each other, and sort of thinking about those things.
Ted, are you our moon? Are you the sun?
Yeah, I'm just the moon.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks everyone for sharing. It sounds like you all have like concepts, that you're working with about cards and what they can mean. And I would say, when you're looking at a card, like the image is an invitation, and that there's no bad card, and there's no wrong meaning for a card. And that's the first time, like I share this anecdote sometimes with folks when I'm talking about tarot, because I'm really glad that it happened to me. When I very first got interested in reading, there was like a local witch, and she heard that I was like starting to play around with the cards. I was a teenager, and like the town I'm from is really small in Vermont, and she asked me out for tea, and we went, and she was like, so what kind of deck did you have? And I was like, a Rider-Waite deck. And she was like, okay, that's great. She was like, now how are you getting into it? And I was like, well, I've been reading this book. And she was like, never read a book. Don't stop. She was like, the cards are going to tell you everything that you need to know. A certain number of years down the line, when you really want to start exploring like the deeper like mythology or symbology of the cards, like that can happen. But like as you're starting out right now, like just look at them. So I don't know where y'all are at with like varying like levels of feeling like you understand or have like a relationship with the cards, but I think one really fun thing to do is to just sit and look at them, and also to map them, because this thing that's been really bothering me lately is that like, you get these books, right? And like it goes through 0 through 21, and it tells you a definitive meaning for each of them, and sometimes it even tells you what it means when it's upside down. And like, I don't believe in reversals, or I believe in using reversals, but that it's a case-by-case situation, and we can maybe talk more about that later. But like, if the tarot is a world, like, wouldn't it be more interesting if we were given a map? Like, I want to see a landscape where like, okay, here's this river running here, and here are these two towers where the moon is. And if we're looking at this other card, we can see where the moon is in relationship to that card, which means that we now know that these two people are neighbors, so they gossip all the time. And like, this person lives underneath the skirt of the high priestess, because obviously given like the shade in the background, like, I really believe that like you can like the world is so immersive and fun in that way, and that's the way that I've become like super familiar, and I still use the Rider-Waite deck when I read people. And given that like each deck is an instrument, like each instrument brings like a different vibe or a different sound to a reading. So you can use one deck to sort of get your baseline. Like I always use the Rider-Waite to read, but then I'll pull from other decks that I'll be like, oh yeah, well the Mother Piece's version of Judgment brings this whole other concept into this that can be visually represented to the person who I'm reading in order to like gain another facet of understanding about what this might mean to them. But I really think like sticking with the image is crucial, and like being open to receiving what the holistic picture is also really fun. I don't have a plan. I'm just going to put that out there, because I thought that it would be really interesting to see what you all might be interested in talking about or learning about or dissecting and unpacking. And that could mean that we talk about the major arcana. It could mean that we talk about like how to read yourself, how to structure a reading, how to look at the minors. We can talk about like breaking down the binary of the tarot, and the ways in which a lot of decks depict like heteronormative white people that live in this world that like I think is starting to like it's getting flipped a little bit by the people in the margins, and the way that I approach tarot is I try to stay as far away from like the binary constructs of it as possible, because I think that it's limiting, and that there's much more beyond that. Is there a general direction as to where we might want to go? We could also do a reading as a group, like we could all take a turn shuffling, and then we could lay it down and we could just start talking and seeing. One of the things that I feel like I'm good at and I'm well suited at is like looking at a reading and explaining like what is happening in the bigger picture, and then like getting into the dissection of the smaller things. So that may be kind of a fun thing to do. How do you all feel?
I think a group reading. would-
Yeah?
That sounds good.
Okay,
yeah.
we can start there and then like
Just looking at your process, watching your
Yeah.
process.
So let's use my deck. I brought a bunch of decks. I've been doing this thing that feels like kind of, not obscene, but like, I feel kind of like naughty maybe. I'm doing a workshop at a gathering in Oregon in June, and it's pretty well like represented and well known. And so I've just been writing all these companies and being like, hey, do you want to give me a free tarot deck at this gathering? And they're like, sure. And so I'm like,
Clever.
yeah, I'm like a massive connection, and I'm like, I'll shout out to you on Instagram or whatever. And I am very grateful. Like I don't, and like a lot of the artists are, their work should be seen. And there's so many decks, and they're like the classic decks for sure, but like there are these smaller decks that really are pushing things around that have been stagnant for a while. Are you all familiar with the Rider-Waite deck?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is like the very first deck that I got. My sister and I have a younger sister. We have given each other the same Christmas present every year since this happened. Like, this happened when I was 18, so for the last 10 years, every year, it's like ridiculous. Like one year we each got each other aprons without talking about it. This year it was like coffee things, and like the first time it happened was with this deck, and I gave her one and she gave me one, and we were like, that's so weird. And now it's kind of this game where we're like, is it gonna happen again? And we're just like, okay. It's just funny the way things work sometimes. I'll just say quickly that when I'm reading another person, I usually start by grounding just a little bit. I'm not like, I like to lie in the more like critical thinking camp, and I love to like get my meditation dress on or whatever, but I'm like, I don't spend 15 minutes with my eyes closed. But I do think it's important to ground. And also to use the silk around the thing, if it's like a really special deck, to like honor that. And this is the cloth that came with this deck first, and it used to be like a big white square and have a pattern on it, but now it's just like an old web. So I'll start shuffling and then I'm just gonna pass it around. Does that make sense? Okay, and then let's just do a Celtic cross. Do we want to have an intention for the reading, or do we want to just see what happens?
See what happens.
Okay, great. It's a reading for the room. How about that? Because we're going to want to place it somewhere. Because context is important, especially when you're like, I feel like it's important to like pin it to something.
So what should I do?
Just shuffle.
Should I just shuffle?
Yeah, let's just each go around and shuffle. And then we'll lay down 10 cards. And I'm going to get some wine while you're doing that.
Sorry,
Good
that,
planning.
that couch was sucking me in. I really couldn't do it. I was just like, sorry.
What do you mean by have a context? Do you mean like have a specific question? Or?
Well, I think like if we were to just lay down the cards, like do we know what, if it's just floating, then it's like to draw the angles and the parallels to it, like it's harder for me to not have a root when I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I'm reading other people, I tell them, like, you can come with a question. You can tell me the question. You don't have to tell me the question. But a lot of times what will end up happening is that what ends up happening on the spread, like, the answers don't always. Sometimes another question needs to get answered before that question can get answered. And so it's like we just have to go back to the door that will then like open that up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it should have something that grounds it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the reason that I use the Celtic cross spread a lot when I'm reading folks is because it's just like a really good objective, like slice, like aerial view of like what's going on. I feel like it's really comprehensive. And then if it doesn't, if the person is feeling like they want more specificity about something that doesn't feel answered, then like I'll just start pulling more cards from there and build on it, but I think it's a good framework. And especially like if something isn't making sense to someone, then like I'll just, you know, we'll just like build it out until it resonates with them. When I started reading people, I felt really like nervous about being right all the time. And now I don't feel nervous about that at all, because there's ways and angles to like build things in, and like it's just what you're perceiving and what you're seeing, and like to really read, to give a reading, it's like it's spontaneous, right? Like there's things about it where like, yes, there are these individual aspects that need to be considered on their own, but like to be able to like really just like braid and like draw conclusions and integrate them all together, like. And sometimes something doesn't make sense to me, and I'm like, it's really weird that this card is here, and I have no idea why. So let's move around it and circle it and like see what happens as we talk about these other things, and then it's gonna be like, whoop, and that's usually what happens.
I tried a really neat thing the night before last that in all these years of doing tarot I'd never done. I've done double readings before, but in this case what I did was I had 2 decks, and I laid out the Celtic cross, and then with the other deck I laid out right next to it another one, so that each one had a partner. I'd never done that. And it really felt like, even though it was just a couple nights ago, and I thought, oh, this will be interesting to do in the future. I could tell that it had the potential to show you so many nuances, and maybe others have done it, but I just hadn't run across it, and this was more of a notion because I have to be sitting at the table with 2 decks in front of me.
So did you use the exact same cards for both, or did you just do 2 separate readings?
2 separate readings that were side by side, but then it made so there were 2 significators, 2, I mean, the whole thing, of course, but it was
2 pools.
Yeah, it was
Like
very interesting.
Yeah.
It almost felt like you got to see things from 2 angles.
So you put down one card, and then you went to the other deck and did another one.
No, I put down the whole reading, and then
you
I
did
just
another
had a
one?
notion, I'm going to put another whole reading right next to it, and that, but anyway, that was just something I thought I'd share, because it really did seem like it might be fruitful. It's interesting, because you were saying how you wanted to do a simplified reading, like the Celtic cross was feeling too complicated, and you wanted to go to even a more basic reading, but
Is this
the
top,
point
or is
I
this
was at was like, I was loving to see this
Even more.
kaleidoscope. Yeah, it's more.
I wonder if that would be like some sort of partnership, or like if there was a mediation that needed where both people wanted some resolution.
It's really fun. Be worth a try.
So this is funny. Just because like one of like the things about my reading style, and I'm sure plenty of other folks do this too, but whenever I see a page, I pull another card, because the page is a messenger and it needs to bring through like whatever the message is. So that means that then I'm like,
After you've drawn the whole thing.
yeah, I let it play out, and then I'm like, okay,
Replace
then I
it?
feel like this is like this,
Wow.
and then I'm like, this is like this. Okay, so these go together, The first thing that I do when I look at a reading is I look at where if there are any major arcana cards, where they are. So we have Justice, we have the Fool, and we have the Tower. And then the second thing that I do is I look at where the uprights are and where the reversals are. So we've got one, let's see, this is like this, and then this is like the second card. The reversals start here, because this is the third card that I threw down. And I always, like the way that I deal with reversals is I really often, and not always, but to generalize, like I think that sometimes what a reversal can mean is that the energy of the card, like if there's a key, it just hasn't been unlocked yet. So that will often be the beginning of then the sequential reversals in the reading all coming into the activated sense of what that card signifies, but that it will often begin with like one particular thing that's like, okay, so this is what we need to figure out, and then once we're figuring that out, we're going to unlock all of those other doors that get us to where we need to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And how do you unlock them?
Well, that's a good question. So if this is a reading for this room, let's like bookmark that, and then we should come back to it, because I feel like the way that I can best explain that has to do more with like the specificity of this situation. Then I start to look at where the deck can be like or the spread can be like a Rorschach. Is that how you say that? Yeah, like sometimes you'll see a Rorschach. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Maybe like an
Rorschach,
inky
yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So like here's like where is this conversation happening? Where are things playing with each other? We've got
Rorschach in the sense of mirror image.
Yeah. Like earlier today I gave a reading where here I had the Magician and here I had the King of Swords, and the way that the Magician's arms were going up and down mirrored the way that the sword was being held by the King in the reversal. So it looked like there was this slice that was happening with this outcome card that was in the reversal, but it was like the Magician card was lording over the reading, and like the eventuality, like the outcome card was like to like slice the curtain open or something like that.
Right.
So to like flirt with and like try to figure out like what the visual imagery is telling us, like, okay.
But this is kind of interesting. I mean, if I just was to look at this,
yeah,
like these swords are following into the lap, in a way of the King of Cups.
And like, what's dropping here? Like, what is he trying to drop here?
Yeah.
And like, this is kind of an interesting thing too. And like, look at this flower. Where does this flower want to go? And like,
I see something here with these very still figures
Totally.
at the center of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's where I try to like, and whenever I read someone, and just before I forget, one thing I want to say, if you're reading other people, is that you can always refuse to read somebody, because energy doesn't lie, and if you feel like at all trepidatious about reading somebody, don't do it. Because they're only going to be working against you, and you're only going to feel like you're failing them, and it's just no fun, and you don't have to do it. And I just say that to...
Sometimes I think like the Five of Cups looks like a locked tower.
Yes, and that building appears, so we need to just bring these other guys into the conversation, I think. That building appears elsewhere. Where does it appear? Because that river, right, where is it? Here, okay, so this is going to take a second, but it's going to be good. It is. Yeah, who said that? That's totally what it is.
I think I heard that on a podcast.
What is it?
The Four of Wands has this, let's see.
That's a tower.
When you're looking for it, it's the last one.
Okay, so this, to me, this is this, because look at this archway here, it's this. Like, that's what's happening there. And then there's another archway that the Nine of Pentacles, I think, is, it's like she's the tender of this garden.
Oh, right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
The lady with the bird.
I saw her.
I noticed something about this card the other day that I'd never seen before, which is great because I've had this deck for 10 years. Did you guys know that there's a snail here?
No.
Right? I'm like, this card is about like being slow and listening to the messages, because like we've got this cute ass hawk here.
Who's
Like
she?
the Nine of Pentacles.
I love her.
Yeah.
I love her too because she's in her solitude and she's built this little kingdom and she's just like tuned in, and she's taking her own time. And I always thought that was just a squiggle, but then I was like, wait, no, that's a
But the snail and the hawk, you've got swiftness and slowness.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Close to the earth.
Yeah.
The sky.
So there's like, where else do we have landscape situations?
Well, I've noticed the page of cups into the 5 of cups, that river's flowing right along, and it is true, like the initiating an exciting new emotional situation could then lead into the future, that there are the losses to it, you know, so I see that river flowing right along.
And look who lives underneath this awning.
Oh, the arch.
It's like there, or the archway. Yeah.
Is that what you mean by like mapping them?
Yes. Like it's literally like there's a landscape that exists. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is trying to figure out how to map them, and I had this epiphany the other day because I was trying to do it flat on a page, and then I was like, no, it's a globe. Like these things meet each other. So then I started doing this ridiculous thing where I was like in the place that I was living, and like I flipped a colander that was green upside down and it represented this one hill, and then I had like a yoga mat for the river, and I was just like putting the cards in the landscape where they depicted themselves to see where these relationships are. Because like the fact that there isn't a map just drives me crazy. Because if somebody had just been like, here's a map, like look at it, like here's where we go, I feel like
Probably not linear though.
it's not. And that's what's so cool
It's
about
like there's
it.
no time and space. It's just happening all at once.
Right. It's like it's a complete it's a little orb that's just like
Well, yeah, and you also have the different seasons. I mean, the contrast between this season and this one, right? So you're also mapping through time as well as space. It complicates it a little bit.
And just as you're holding that, I'm realizing, okay, so like that's the inside of this, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And who lives in the basement?
Yeah.
You know, like there's so much. I love looking at it in this way. I also, just before I forget, because I know, let's see, I hadn't seen this before, and then I was reading this book today by Rachel Pollack. Are any of you familiar with 78 Degrees of Wisdom? So she has this other book called The Forest of Souls, and it's like a walk through the tarot. And I had never, ever, ever in my life thought about the fact that you actually can see behind this curtain that the high priestess sits before, but there's water back there. Like, I had never noticed that before. And I was always like, oh, she lives on the moon. Like, she lives on the dark side of the moon. And I'm like, actually, I might need to move her around. And maybe she doesn't. I mean, I kind of do think that she lives there, but...
But the moon also moves around.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking, like, in terms of this arch that you pointed out,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that in this one there's a tower and in this one there isn't,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that might
That's after the
signify
tower fell.
something about this relationship.
Right.
And here the darkness is cloaking the figure, whereas here the gray is on the inside and the darkness is all around it.
Right.
I don't know if there's some sort of
Well,
reversal.
it's a way of internalizing or externalizing, like, grief and loss and upheaval in some way. So if this were a reading so if we were to break into this reading, so we're looking at it, like, and I do, like, if I'm doing a Celtic crossbred for another person, I try generally to start here. But it's really funny with these pages, right? Like, that's a lot to unpack right at the get. So what I would probably do here is I would be like, okay, so... And also, like, you know, taking a moment to really think about all of these things. And, you know, there's only so much thinking you can do. And, like, I never really have a plan for what I think I'm going to say, but, like, I'll try to at least be like, right, okay, like, blah, 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 like, this guy, that guy, ending. Like, just to have a little bit of a framework in my mind. But it's almost more interesting to see, like, what happens spontaneously. And even as I was just saying that, what I was actually thinking about was the fact that this is, like, the red top here. Was that what you were saying earlier? About, like, the tower falling? It's like this, I don't know, like, it's like the hat or whatever, like, it comes off and bursts into flame. Okay, anyways.
I just was thinking of
king, and then lower, page, and then lower, just a regular commoner.
And yeah, I'm glad that you point that out, because I wanted to say that oftentimes I find in a reading that's heavier with the minor arcana, like the minor arcana are what, like, what's the word I'm looking for? They like aspect the majors in the reading. So like the major arcana are like, you know, these big life things like the Tower, the Fool, like death, the Lovers. Like they're these more like the aspects of them archetypally are more like they're wider, but that the minor arcana are a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more subtle and have to do more with like the day-to-day moving parts of a situation. So if I'm reading someone and it's all minor arcana, I'm like, damn, this is very specific to like the coming days or even like hours or even week. Whereas if I'm reading someone and it's like really, really heavy with majors, I'm like, okay, this is like a bigger picture situation that's gonna take like some moving through. In which case sometimes I will pull until I get a minor card to like help aspect that major. And we've got we've got the page, we've got the knight, we've got the king. And swords, cups, pentacles. So no wands. Are you all familiar with what the minor arcana represent? Like, okay. So if we're starting with the Page of Cups, like, and this is also like, you know, just to go through quickly, you know, current life situation, totally objective slice, like nobody else's opinion, but like the universe's, and it's right here. And then this, what covers you, it's either what's preventing you or allowing you from moving forward in that situation. Then I read this as the best advice card. This is the subconscious. This is the recent past. And then the immediate future. How you see yourself. Influence, which can be like a community, or what you're surrounding yourself with, or a person, and then hopes and fears, and then outcome. So, as I was saying, like, you know, generally starting here, this feels like a quagmire that I'm like not ready to unpack, right? So like, the place I want to go to is I want to look at, okay, knights, horses, like, the best advice. I'm really curious about what this pentacle has to do with this, because I feel like this is all, this column, like this feels like it's talking to itself, or like that this is a holistic thing, and that these things maybe are like flanking, like what is going on right here, and then this feels kind of like a different part of the reading. So if we're looking, does anyone have anything that jumps out at them in what they might say about these cards, or should I just?
I'm also captivated by that Knight of Pentacles, because it seems to be the only card where there isn't a solitary figure. I mean, it's a man on a horse, and there seems to be more solidity in it somehow.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring that up, and you know, we'll read this, but there's like so much richness in what y'all are saying. I want to pull out the knights because you make this point that I feel like is really crucial to.
Well, in death too.
Yeah, definitely. But like the way that the rider is